Welcome to the Fresh RN podcast. In this podcast, we will be discussing various nursing scenarios, personal experiences, policies, and procedures. The information contained in this podcast is meant to supplement your existing knowledge and not replace it. Always refer to your state board of nursing and respective facilities' policies, procedures, and protocols to guide your practice. Thanks, nurses. Stay fresh.
I'd love to take your brain out, Katie Cleveland.
We're getting snazzy.
You were a novice?
Yes.
A brand new nurse?
Yes, I was.
That does not make any sense. It totally threw me off. I was like, wait a minute.
There's another voice.
There's another voice.
Da, da, da.
Don't be the D word.
But we're not playing sport.
There's a U. R.
Should we change the episode title? Delegating, comma, not being a jerk.
I'd like to welcome back to the stage Katie Cleveland and Elizabeth Moon.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am Katie Kleber.
And I'm Elizabeth Mills.
And we're talking real low right now for some reason.
It's middle of the day.
We're getting snazzy. So this episode, guys.
Time for siesta.
This episode, guys, is about delegation. Delegation is a tough thing to do. No matter what, but I think it's even more tough when you're a brand new nurse, because I don't know about you guys, but when I started both my jobs, it'd be first nursing job and then again my second one, I'm starting and I felt like a novice. And when I was a brand new nurse, I definitely was a novice. And then there were like 3 or 4.
You were a novice?
Yes.
A brand new nurse?
Yes, I was.
That does not make any sense.
So I met like 4 CNAs that had worked on that unit for like 10 years. And it was really challenging to delegate to these people who I felt like they could like run circles around me. Like I felt like they knew way more than I did.
And you know what's crazy is delegation. Never really realized this, but like they talk about it in nursing school. They discuss it like it's a annual mandatory education requirement, like continuing ed hour, usually at least every year. So delegation is a big deal.
Well, and what's funny is on the NCLEX in nursing school and in those education things, they talk about
They're NCLEX questions about it.
But they talk about what to delegate, but they don't tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
So we're not going to talk about in this episode what you can and cannot delegate safely to other people. We're just not going to talk about that. That's a big topic. It can vary slightly from state to state. That is not what we're talking about. We're going to talk about how the heck do you essentially tell somebody else to do something.
Right.
And be very gracious about it and work on a team together and not be a jerk.
Yes. So this is just delegating, not being a jerk.
Should we change the episode title? Delegating, comma, not being a jerk.
Yeah. Delegating without being
jerky.
All
right. Cool. Okay. So
it's a whole section of the workforce called management.
That's our third co-host, Kieran, over there. So
totally threw me off. I was like, wait a minute.
There's another voice.
There's another voice.
Da, da, da. But that's true. I mean, I think nursing, this is in every single career, or I feel like any like thing that you work in, not just nursing, but nursing is different because you're kind of working with people's lives and stuff, and things can be like, no, I need you to do this right now.
Right. And you're working in a high stress environment. So things that can come across as being rude or nasty, not necessarily. You're just under a lot of stress.
And being assertive.
So it's important to learn how to communicate. So
I think one of the first thing to do as a brand new nurse on a unit is you don't make that mistake of walking in and first day just telling people what to do. It's really important to develop a rapport with people. So you're like, okay, hi, my name's Katie. Oh, you're a CNA on this unit. It is really nice to meet you. How long have you been working here?
Yeah.
Great. Do you live in town? Like, oh, that's Starbucks. Oh, what Starbucks drink is that? That looks delicious. Like actually like putting in a little bit of time to get to know people, because you probably will be delegating to them very soon, but it's important to develop rapport with them. And it's also important to see how your preceptor interacts and observe how delegation kind of flows on the unit. Like people's personalities kind of deal with delegation very differently, both how they delegate to other people and how they receive tasks being delegated to them. I guess, if that makes sense.
And sometimes, you're going to be delegating a lot to nursing assistants. And there's sometimes this unwritten, I don't know what the word is, but some CNAs feel like, they're just being bossed around from nurses, and they're not appreciated. And so sometimes they I don't know. I know in the very beginning of my career, I had worked as a CNA before a nurse.
Me too.
Which is really important. I think if you have that opportunity to work as a nurse, you should work as a CNA before you become a nurse. But I always I made sure that I didn't feel like I just dumped on them stuff like. Sometimes I feel like CNAs feel like because they're nurses or RNs, the nurses are too good to give a bath or too good to clean up some nasty stuff, And so I kind of made sure that I went sort of out of my way to make sure that the CNAs that I worked with did not feel that way. And that made for better relationships, I think.
I think if you couple that, because that is essential, that's like part of it. And I think another little part of it too is valuing their expertise.
Yeah.
So while they're not a nurse, they still have a pretty good value to their expertise. Like when I was a brand new nurse, I wasn't great at giving bed baths. And when I started in critical care, I was not great at giving bed baths to intubated, sedated patients on, with a drain coming out of their brain and their stomach and their arm. And, but the CNAs, man, they could do that with their eyes closed. So I definitely, at both places, when I first started out, kind of like, asked CNA, hey, can I come help you give a bed bath? And watch how they do it. Watch what supplies do they get? What do they do first? Interacting with them. And I think that's part of it. So I think if you're able to value their expertise and also not just like, oh, you're a CNA, so you do baths and I don't do them. Or, 10 people, if you think about a CNA has, you have your patients. The CNA has multiple nurses with multiple patients. Mm-hmm. Their workload, while it's not as in-depth as yours, is still very large. And they still, it's physically impossible for them to honestly take to the bathroom everybody at once.
Oh, they can't.
They can't. And especially if someone is, one person takes a while and then, it's important to view it as a team thing. It's not like, okay, so CNAs do take everyone to the bathroom and they do all the baths. But also too.
And I've seen it done where nurses just kind of dump on the CNAs. And, there's, some, and on the floor, those CNAs may have up to 10, 12, 15 patients.
Yeah, or even more. And it's physically impossible for them to bathe everybody, turn everybody, bring them to the bathroom, check their blood sugar.
Yeah. And so if you've got a CNA who's, helping someone else go to the bathroom and then your patient calls out and says they need to go to the bathroom, and don't go and say, hey, take, if you've got an opportunity to go do it. Or if you're in the room, and they've got to go to the bathroom, don't leave the room to go to find your CNA. It's not always possible. You may have some other things that are going on, but don't be the D word.
I remember, and also I spent some time just kind of getting to know the CNAs, and I think they appreciated that. And one of them opened up to me and was like, man, I'm really frustrated with this other nurse that just started.
Yeah.
She, the patient peed and it got on the floor, and she spent 10 minutes going room to room looking for me to clean that up, when it would have taken a fraction of that time for her to grab a towel and a wipe and to clean it up herself.
Yeah.
And I feel like my time's not being respected.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, you just this is your responsibility.
And let me tell you, if you have a CNA if you're working with a CNA who's had experience on that unit, who's been there forever, they're invaluable. They are sacred, and they can make or break. Having a good CNA will make your shift. It can make or break your shift because
Tasha Davis, I love you.
Right, I know, and
she's the best CNA.
And let me tell you, I mean, but she's also like, you know, I've learned so much from her. I've learned so much from so many CNAs, but I mean, God love you, because I don't know. They're invaluable. So we need to, nurses need to be appreciative of good CNA help.
So yeah, we've kind of talked about, like, before you even get to the point of delegating a task, right? So you want to build rapport with them, and you want to value their expertise.
Get to know them.
Right. As people. They are a member of your team. If you're thinking about I compare a lot to athletics, but if you're just joining this basketball team for the first time, like, just because maybe they're not the star point guard doesn't mean that they're not a valuable aspect.
And they, CNAs have to float a lot. They'll get pulled they may get pulled around multiple times during a shift. And so if you have a CNA who's come to work with you, or a nurse, but if you have a CNA who's come to work with you and they normally work in another shift, the first thing I say is, hey, thanks for coming to help us out. We really appreciate it. So saying thank you can't say thank you enough.
So let's talk about when you actually have to delegate something. And I think there's an important thing to know, that you as the nurse, if you are delegating to somebody else, the complete responsibility does not transfer from you to that other person.
Yeah.
It is, and actually I read this in an NCLEX book. And it's probably, although you guys have already passed your NCLEX, but you delegate to a CNA, but it's up to you as the nurse to ensure that it is done delegated appropriately, obviously, because you're doing it, but making sure that it's completed appropriately. So it's like, if you tell a CNA if you delegate to a CNA to take a blood pressure, and then you go do 20 other things and you forget, and then 4 hours later they're doing their routine check again and the blood pressure's sky high and the doctor's mad that the other one wasn't addressed, it's your fault.
Right.
Because you didn't follow back up. Hey, why wasn't that blood pressure taken? So it's important to remember that while you are transferring some responsibility, you ultimately retain it when you're delegating to non-licensed personnel.
A good example of making sure that you're, this kind of goes in making sure that you're communicating effectively or delegating effectively to that person is, this deals with, like, identifying the right patient. Mm-hmm. But there was a lady, a patient who had some kind of bladder surgery or something and had a Foley catheter. Well, she was in room 407 or 417 or something like that, 407. And the nurse told the CNA, hey, go take the Foley out of room 417. That's all she said. So the CNA mistakenly went into room 407 and took out this patient's catheter, and there was a problem.
Well, and I think I've heard this scenario before, that the catheter was removed on a patient that had it placed in the OR.
Right.
And they were going to have another surgery
to get that catheter put back in.
Yeah.
So it's so important to delegate the task, communicate the task effectively.
Yeah, and if it's something like removing a line or something like that, the CNA, or if you're asking your coworker to do it for you, that you visually see the order.
Yeah.
On our neuro ICU, we'll discontinue drains that are going into people's brains. So sometimes we help each other out and we'll discontinue them for each other. And part of that is taking it out of their brain and placing a suture. So if Elizabeth asked me, hey, can you DC the brain? DC the brain.
DC their brain. I'd love to take your brain out, Katie Cleaver.
I don't even know what that means, but it sounds bad.
That would be so much fun.
Remove the brain, stat. Thank you. I'm tired of listening to her talk. Remove the drain. I'm like, all right. So part of before I gather my supplies, I go look at that patient and I make sure there is an order in the computer that says discontinue the drain.
And sometimes the CNAs can't see those orders.
Yeah, so you want to pull them up for them. So
Major stuff like that. But it's also, it's your responsibility to make sure that they do it right, or make sure it's done carefully. I know in a lot of there's these new models of nursing, and it's all talking about practicing at the top of your license and making sure that you're doing all that you can out of your practice. But you need to be aware, and once again, we're not getting into specifics about what to delegate to people, but you should, as a nurse, kind of know what your CNA can and cannot do.
Yeah, because it does vary widely.
Right.
Very wide. Yeah, right. Because people have different competencies and different things. And honestly, if your CNA can draw blood, sweet,
awesome.
Then that should, and they're hanging out, kicking it on their cell phone in the nurse's station, we're going to have them draw that blood you need. Like that's an important thing. So let's go in though to how you actually delegate it. And I think it's important to do it in a way where it is not demeaning, but it's very I need you to do this, or Mr. Smith in room 2 needs to use the restroom. Can you take him? And I think that one downfall I've seen of some new nurses, and a lot of people really, when you get started on a unit, you want to be friends with people pretty quickly. And a lot of new nurses will bond with CNAs or whomever, and they become kind of BFFs with the CNA. So then when they need to actually delegate to them, it is much more challenging. And then it's framed as a favor as opposed to a task that needs to be completed for the patient. Yeah. So it's like, hey, can you take this person to the bathroom for me? And it's like, if you frame it like that, it's framed like an option. This isn't that big of a deal. It's just between friends. It's like, no, actually, this is between colleagues, and this patient needs this. Right. And it's not because I just would like you to do it. It's because the patient needs it. Right. So I encourage you, yes, be friends with people, but don't cross that buddy-buddy line where people think oh, I don't actually really, it's just a favor. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
I don't know if I'm articulating that right.
No, it's professional.
Yes, this professionalism, accountability.
Yeah, right.
And 2, I want to talk about
accountability is a good word.
Yeah, and that's a big thing with delegation, and that kind of flows into what I was just going to say was when things aren't done correctly, and when we do need to chat accountability wise, because not everybody's going to do everything right the first time. And I remember doing things where it's okay, I've had a CNA once was documenting that she was doing passive range of motion on every patient. And I was like, I don't see you do that. Are you just copying and pasting from one thing to the next? I was like, hey, just so you know, right here, you charted that I've done passive range of motion every hour on this patient. When I know when you haven't done that, and it's not really necessary because the patient can do their own range of motion if it's necessary. So you'll have to take that out just so you know. Talking like that, really hey, just so you know, that's kind of a big deal to do that. Let's not make sure you're not doing that. And then when you offer or when you provide that correction, when you provide that education and that accountability piece, the important thing is you don't treat them any differently. You immediately are hey, what are you going to get for lunch or whatever? Because people review correction and corrective criticism pretty negatively. It's really hard. I think a lot of people take it personally when it's not meant to be.
No, right.
And so the best way to kind of smooth that over is to make sure that I don't think you're a bad nurse. I don't think you're a bad CNA. I just needed to make sure that we're on the same page about this because this is not personal. This is total business.
It's patient care.
It's care.
Being safe.
You're either doing it right or you're doing this aspect of it right or not. So I need to let you know, hey, you need to do this differently, and then blah blah blah.
And oftentimes they want it. I want to know if I'm doing something wrong. They're okay with. I think it's how you deliver it.
Absolutely.
And if it's repeated and it goes on, and you feel like you can't necessarily communicate, or you kind of you're not getting kind of what you need, then you kind of have to take it up the chain of command.
Right. You flow into exactly the 2 things I was going to say. So it's one thing if you notice someone's doing something incorrectly and you provide the education and the correction and the encouragement to do better, and they continue to knowingly do something negligent or incorrect. that requires another conversation. And there should be a level of professional accountability. A manager doesn't need to be brought in with that first instance, and probably not that second instance. We need to hold each other accountable as professionals. And then when we're noticing a pattern, that's when you bring in up the chain of command. That's when you bring in the manager, the charge nurse. That's when you add another person to that.
Right.
Because the more we kind of, it's the responsibility of somebody else to deal with this, that's when things don't get dealt with. But honestly, what I've run into is most people want to do things the right way. Like you were saying, most people want to know if they're doing something wrong. And that reminds me of a very specific example I have when I was working in an ICU, and a CNA I noticed she was tipping the Foley catheter incorrectly and getting her I&Os incorrect, which is, in a lot of ICUs, people have what's called a Foley catheter. It continuously drains their urine. And then there's what's called a urometer on that bag that it drains into, so that we can see clearly exactly how much urine is draining very frequently. And that way, so what the CNAs would do is they'd see what number it is, and then they'd tip it back and empty it, essentially, so that they could, for the next hour, see what it was. Well, sometimes patients are real sick and they're dumping a ton of urine, and they're not, if you just dump it back, you're not getting the accurate number because more could have spilled back. Kind of confusing. It's hard to, honestly, this is a little confusing, and it was confusing for her, and she was doing it incorrectly. And I was like, hey, let me show you. I'm not sure how much urine this patient put out because of blank. Here, let me show you this. And then she was like, thank you so much for showing me that. I have worked here for a year. And everyone says, I've had people say to me, don't worry, I'll get my own urines. Because I think they think I'm not doing it right, but I've asked and nobody showed me. And I truly just want to know how to do this right. So these nurses were taking on this additional responsibility they didn't need to, when all they needed to do was encourage and educate this person. And she truly wanted to do it correctly. And I feel like that's most of it. But you know what, though? There are people that don't, and they don't care, and they just want to kick it on their phone. So what do you do in those situations?
Then you go up the chain of command. Mm-hmm. Then you're going to have some situations. You work with some nurses who do that as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's not a CNA. That's nurses too.
I actually had a situation where, this is not a CNA. This was another nurse. And, this kind of goes, it's not really talking about delegating, but, that nurse would disappear, and her alarms were beeping and her IVs were beeping, and I was getting so frustrated with her. And I was like, hey, I can't find you. You seem to keep disappearing. I said, is everything okay? And actually what was wrong was she was really sick and she didn't want to say anything. But
was that me when I was pregnant? No, I'm just kidding.
But she was trying to be brave superwoman, and she's like, I'm sorry, she had to keep running to the bathroom. And I was like, so, stuff like that. I was, you kind of, if you feel like somebody's not there, you feel like your help's not there, you're trying to get things done and you're delegating, but some stuff's not done, and you can kind of go and say, hey, is everything okay? I noticed this wasn't done, or, what's going on? Is it, don't be like, hey, you keep disappearing on me,
right.
I can't find you.
I think that is so important to approach it from that perspective.
Yeah, just kind of be careful with your wording. One of the things I have a problem with, and I still have a problem with to this day, is I don't delegate. I like to do the job my way, get it done myself. I'm somebody that's I don't want to have to spend 10 minutes explaining to you what I need done when I could get this done in 3 minutes. But then I have 1,000 other things I need to do.
Right.
So that is something that is very challenging for me. And people get mad at me and people get frustrated because they're like, Elizabeth, we can do this. Why don't you tell us what to do? Da, 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 da. And so what can we do to help that?
Yeah, I think that's important, because while that 10 minutes at that time is really frustrating, that empowers that person to be able to know how to do that in the future.
Yeah.
So, because it's not like you just know how to do, the CNA knows how to do everything and they either do it or they don't. It's a journey. Our journey is of being a good nurse. same with them being a good CNA. And every day we want to sew more into them to make them more autonomous and be able to do as much independently as possible, so that there are days where eventually we're at the point where it's like, hey, I have sewn into this person. I trust them, and my trust is continuing to build, so that I know, like I said her name, Tasha Davis. Like, I know when I walk in, I know she's getting my blood. I know she's getting these things done. I know she's blah, 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 because so many people have really sewn into this person. So I think that's an aspect of it. But then it's hard to do that when you don't know the CNA. It's hard to do that when, maybe it's someone that's floated.
A level of trust, right?
Yeah, you have to have a level of trust, and then continue to increase that, and then give people as much autonomy as legal, I guess, because it enables you both to be very efficient with your time. And then if they're able to take things off of your plate, it enables you to be with your patient more and not doing tasky stuff.
And establishing that delegation communication, making sure that the same task is not unnecessarily done multiple times. So,
example.
Let's see.
I have an example. So, like, maybe you want to turn them on the hour on every 2 hours, but the CNA came in and turned them 30 minutes ago, but you want to turn them again. Like,
you're not doing the same. Different people aren't doing the same tasks over and over. I'm trying to give an example. Turning would be a good example. So, I just turned the patient, then the CNA went and turned the patient again. Well, maybe it didn't necessarily need to be done that many times. It's a waste of time. It's not being efficient with time.
Right.
I've worked in units where the nurses were responsible for getting their temperatures and urine outputs and things like that. And so I would get the temperature, and then let's just say the CNA came in and got the temperature again. That was a waste of time. It doesn't need to be done that many times. So it's important to start off your shift. I know they stress kind of starting off your shift, talking to your CNA and saying, hey, okay, let's, my patient's supposed to get a bath this shift. Can we kind of shoot for bathing, look at around 1, 2 o'clock?
Yeah.
Because that CNA's working, like you said, with multiple nurses. Mm-hmm. They need to kind of plan their day. They also, need to plan, lunch breaks and things like that. And, so it's important to just say, hey, what do you think about doing this? And it is kind of good to kind of question or ask them what they think about this. What do they want to do to kind of get their input? That also helps kind of create a better rapport and relationship.
Well, it shows you respect their time.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things I always do is I get report from my nurses from the off-going shift. And then first thing I do is touch base with my CNA. Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Right.
You get some good sleep last night?
Right.
How's your kids? And then, okay, so bed 2 is a day bath. Bed 4, I think you got a bath nap last night. I'm going to be off the floor with bed 4, for a few hours. Do you think we can knock out bed 2's bath before I go? And then maybe they're like, oh, wait, no, I actually have blank that I have to do for this other patient or something. So you're communicating and you're showing you care about their time, and it's not just okay, I'm ready for a bath, let's go, when the CNA is getting ready to walk into another room to do a bath.
Right. Same thing like with, there's CNAs, like, especially in critical care, a patient may have been on an insulin drip and needed blood sugars every hour, and now the insulin drip is off. We're changing the blood sugars to Q6 every 6 hours. In that, nobody told that CNA, so that CNA is going in and checking blood sugars every hour.
Now, thinking they're doing a good job.
And they are doing a great job.
Yeah.
But, it's not necessary. One of the things I think it's important, especially if you're a new nurse in orientation, this is something I witnessed just yesterday, was brand new nurse, first day in orientation. Luckily, that nurse, the preceptor and that nurse had one patient, easy patient. The CNA comes on. She already has like a list of things she needs to do. There's breakfast trays that need to be passed out. People are needing to go to the bathroom, yada, yada, yada. And that nurse and the new nurse, the preceptor and the orientee, went and hunted down that CNA to do a blood sugar. And I was like,
y'all got one patient?
Really? And I feel like as a new nurse, if you're a new nurse in orientation, yeah, you're learning how to delegate. But in the very beginning, you should learn how to manage some of those tasks yourself, because you may not always have that ancillary help with you on a shift. So you need to learn how to manage some of that stuff and learn how to work with your nurse coworkers. And also, too, if you are lucky enough to have a unit that has wonderful volunteers, gosh, utilize them. The volunteers, no, they're not getting paid, and there's a lot of things they can't do with patient care and things, but they can be certain big help with helping run errands or not run errands, but like I was in an isolation room one day and I felt like every 5 minutes I needed something. And we had volunteers, and thank God for them, because they were right there and they could go grab me things. They didn't come into the patient's room. They didn't do anything like that. But if you are a really busy unit and you're short help, sometimes it's good to ask your manager about getting some volunteers to help. They can also help answer the phone. Good grief. The phone rings non-stop.
Oh my God, I hate the phone.
And if
My
you're
phone
in
is always on
rooms
silent now.
and you're being pulled away because the phone constantly is ringing, and you can get some volunteers, that's a good task to delegate to them. And also make sure that you thank them too, because they can be a really great asset to a busy unit.
And I think that the mentality is really important. So nursing truly is a team sport. It is not just, I have my 2 patients, Elizabeth has hers, and Kieran has his, and there's a CNA that kind of helps us out.
There's no I in team.
Yeah, no I in team.
That's such a terrible thing.
So there's...
But there is in win. But we're not playing sports.
There's no I in nurse. So...
Right. There's a U.
Yeah.
R.
All
There's
right.
a U R.
All right.
Oh, dear.
But
It's
where I
almost
was...
lunchtime.
I know. Where we were going with that, though, is... if you just kind of kick it and don't worry about your task, or you only worry about your own task and your own patients, and you refuse to help anyone else or ask if anyone else needs anything, you're going to be a little screwed when you actually need help. Shifts go by so much smoother when everyone works together and everyone's conscious of everyone else's needs, and that includes the CNAs. So when you're worried, if all you're worried about is doing the least amount of work, if you're worried about doing the least amount of work as possible, people really probably don't look forward to working with you.
No, they don't.
And honestly, the truth about nursing is it's not like you've got this certain amount of work you're going to do every shift. Some shifts you're going to do more work than others. Some shifts are going to be more challenging than others. Some shifts you're going to need your CNA more. Some you're going to need them less. But the important thing is that everybody's time is valuable and everybody's working together to help each other out. Like, your patient is not more important than my patient, and our time, everybody's time is valuable.
And I always kind of go in with the mentality of you're working on a unit. All of the patients on that unit are your patients.
Yes.
So you walk by a room, an IV pump's going off. If you're not doing something emergent, go check and see what that IV pump is doing. I guess it's just everybody has got to work together. There's no way you can do this job on your own. And I feel like I'm happier when I'm working with a good team of people, or I'm putting forth teamwork effort, and it's contagious too. People see you going out of your way to be like, hey, what can I help you with? You're going to be busy sometimes, and you're not going to have that opportunity to go and help. But hopefully when you have those moments, they're going to be able to come and help you. But it's
about managing morale and as a team, and as everyone comes together to have a good working experience, you provide better patient care.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting when you have people that everybody cares about the big picture. So like, you have an admission, and then all of your coworkers come in and help and do a little bit. And that way you're not totally overwhelmed.
That's
or,
right.
Your CNA is dying because she has a patient that is jumping out of the bed and is going in and out of that room, or she's dealing with another really frustrating person. So everybody goes and does their own bed bath. Like, doing things like that makes such a big difference. And I want to encourage you, if you find, because, not everybody is helpful and not every CNA is really excited about doing whatever. If you do run into a situation where you're delegating something to someone and you believe in a very respectful, conscientious this way, and you're still getting a pushback. My talking point is when you're like, let's say I'm delegating to Elizabeth, who is sitting at the nurse's station playing on her phone, and I know she doesn't have anything to do. I know she's caught up, and I am dying. And I said, hey, Elizabeth, can you take this patient to the bathroom for me? And no, I gotta do blank. Or no, that's not my patient. That's what I've heard before. That's not my patient.
Yeah.
Like maybe this CNA is responsible for 3 or 4 other patients, or 3 or 4 other nurses' patients. And if I get the response, that's not my patient, my talking point back is, okay, so you're playing here on your phone, and I have asked you to take a patient to the restroom, and you're refusing to do that. Is this correct? That's what I've heard you say, correct? And if they verbalize back yes, then okay, I've got to have a conversation with somebody up.
Right.
Because that's what needs to happen there. Because I've been in that situation, and I want to encourage you to push back on that and not just say, ugh, and then go do it and find that other CNA who's dying and someone else. Because that behavior should not be continued and should be challenged and should be pushed. And people should know that that's occurring, because that people will do that. I've worked with some CNAs that weren't so awesome, and then I've worked with some that were amazing.
But I've heard nurses say, can you help take this person to the bathroom? And the nurse is like, that's not my job. And I'm like, as a matter of fact, it is.
Yeah, I need your help. I'm asking you for help, and you're telling me no. Is that correct? Is my because I think when people realize how ridiculous they sound, sometimes they just need someone to repeat that to them.
I hate when I hear that's not in my pay grade.
So many things are not right. But so that's my encouragement. I think a big thing is just to make sure you're being respectful of their time, and really value being respectful of their time and respectful of them. Truly, a good CNA is worth their weight in gold. CNAs, those job positions turn over frequently.
Yeah.
I find out that a lot of the wonderful CNAs that I work with are in nursing school, and they're not going to be CNAs forever. So truly appreciate the people that are doing great work. And always, if someone does a good job, tell them. I know I feel amazing when a physician or a PA tells me that I did a good job. And think about that, and you're verbalizing that to, a CNA. Hey, I saw you take really good care of that patient today, or that was really nice of you to go do blank.
Right.
So acknowledging that stuff is really important, and investing time to get to know them, building rapport and trust.
Great.
So thank you guys for listening. That was our delegation episode of the Fresh RN podcast. Go ahead and check out freshrn.com/podcast for some show notes and links to some blogs about delegation. If you want to learn more, just have some stuff that's written down. Check out freshrn.com at our gear. We have lots of fun stuff like clinical notebooks and phone cases and mugs and sweatshirts and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for listening, and stay fresh.
Damn girl, better hit the floor. All the other fellas better run for the door. Stop, drop, and roll with me. I got the heat that'll make you scream.